$500. The words cut through the laughter like a blade through cloth. The town square of Copper Ridge fell silent, dust settling in the sudden stillness. Every head turned toward the shadow at the edge of the platform where 10 women stood like cattle awaiting judgment. I stepped forward into the light, my boots heavy on the wooden planks. The crowd pulled back instinctively, forming a corridor of fear and whispered recognition. They knew my name even if they pretended not to. Gideon Thorne, the mountain man who buried a family and never came down. Cyrus Weatherby stood at the center of the platform, his slick suit and oiled hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. His smile faltered when he saw me, just for a moment, before the merchant's mask slid back into place. $500, I repeated, letting my voice carry across the square. Double your asking price, cash. Right now. Weatherby's eyes narrowed. 9 of the 10 brides had already been claimed by ranchers and miners, men whose desperation for companionship outweighed their judgment. But the 10th woman remained, standing straight, despite the crimson shame burning in her cheeks. "Mr. Thorne," Weatherby said, recovering his composure with practiced ease. "What a surprise! I didn't expect to see you among civilized folk today." I ignored the barb, my attention fixed on the woman they had all rejected. She was not young, perhaps 30 years old, with auburn hair pinned severely back, and eyes the color of storm clouds over Montana peaks. Her dress was plain, travel-worn, and her frame was full in a way that made lesser men snicker and turn away. But she had not turned away from me. When I first emerged from the shadows, while others recoiled, she had met my gaze directly. No fear, no pity, just a quiet assessment, as if measuring whether I was real or another cruel illusion. That single glance had been worth more than all the gold I kept hidden beneath my cabin floor. "The fat one?" a drunk miner called from the crowd. "Thorne's gonna take the fat one? He'll need a reinforced saddle just to get her up the mountain." Laughter rippled through the square. The woman's jaw tightened, but she did not flinch. She had heard worse, I could tell, probably every day of her life. I turned slowly toward the heckler, letting silence stretch until his grin faded. Then I spoke, my voice low enough that people had to strain to hear. "The next man who speaks about her like she's livestock will find out how I earned my reputation." The square went quiet again. Different quiet this time. Dangerous quiet. Weatherby cleared his throat. "Mr. Thorne, perhaps we should discuss this privately." He gestured toward the alley beside the land office. I followed, aware of every eye tracking my movement, every whisper swirling like leaves in my wake. Once we were out of earshot, Weatherby's pleasant facade cracked. "What game are you playing, Thorne? I sent for you to collect a delivery, not to buy a bride. You hate people. You live alone on that mountain like some kind of hermit bear." I reached into my coat and produced a leather pouch. The clink of gold coins was unmistakable. "You told me once you owed me your life. Remember? 5 years ago when those bandits hit your wagon train outside Billings. I put 3 of them down before they could cut your throat." Weatherby's hand went unconsciously to his neck, where a faint scar still marked where a knife had drawn first blood. "I remember, and I promised to repay that debt whenever you asked. I'm asking now." I set the pouch in his palm, heavy with more gold than any bride had cost today. "But I'm not asking for your life. I'm asking for hers." He blinked, confusion genuine for once. "Her? Why?" I glanced back toward the platform where the woman still stood, isolated and alone. "Because when I stepped into that square, everyone looked at me like I was death walking. Except her. She looked at me like I was a man." Weatherby studied my face, searching for mockery or madness. Finding neither, he shrugged and pocketed the gold. "Fine, she's yours. But Gideon, understand something. This makes us even. The debt is paid. Don't come looking for favors again." The warning in his tone registered, but I was already turning back toward the square. Weatherby might think we were square, but I knew better. Men like him never truly let debts go. They filed them away for future use, like ammunition stockpiled for a war not yet begun. When I returned to the platform, the woman was still standing in the same spot. She watched me approach with that same steady gaze, no gratitude softening her expression. Good. I had no use for gratitude. "Your name?" I asked. "Nora Calloway." Her voice was steadier than I expected, with an accent that spoke of eastern cities and education. Not what I had anticipated from someone desperate enough to travel west as mail-order merchandise. "Gideon Thorne," I said, though she clearly already knew. "Can you ride?" "If I must." "You must." I gestured toward my horses, two sturdy mountain breeds tied at the edge of the square. "We have 4 days of travel ahead. The cabin is high up. The trail is not forgiving." She nodded once, then gathered her single carpet bag, everything she owned in the world reduced to one small piece of luggage. As she passed the other brides, now clinging to their new husbands, none met her eyes. Shame by association, perhaps, or relief that her fate was not theirs. I helped her onto the smaller of my 2 horses, noting how she arranged herself in the saddle with competence, despite her size. She had ridden before. Another small surprise in what I suspected would be a series of revelations. As we rode out of Copper Ridge, the whispers followed us like smoke. "He'll eat her alive up there. Give it a week before she comes running back. If she can run." More laughter, always laughter at someone else's pain. We rode in silence for the first hour, leaving the town and its cruelty behind. The land began to rise, pines replacing the scrub brush, air growing cleaner with each mile. I kept expecting Nora to speak, to ask questions or make demands, but she remained quiet, her attention on the trail ahead, her hands steady on the reins. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, she broke the silence. "Why did you choose me?" I considered lying, considered deflecting, then decided she deserved truth, however uncomfortable. "Because I need a wife who won't ask about my past, and you need a husband who won't judge you for your body." She absorbed this without visible reaction. "A transaction, then?" "A fair one. You get safety, shelter, and a home where no one will mock you. I get companionship without interrogation. We both get what we need without pretending it's something it's not. And if I want more than that someday?" I glanced at her. "Then we'll discuss it, but for now, this arrangement keeps us both alive and sane. That's more than most marriages can claim." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You're honest, at least. I appreciate that." "Lies take too much energy to maintain," I said. "I'd rather save my strength for surviving." We made camp that first night in a clearing I had used before, where a stream provided fresh water and the trees broke the worst of the wind. I set up a simple shelter while Nora gathered firewood without being asked. She moved efficiently, no wasted motion, as if she had done this work before. When the fire was burning and coffee brewing in my dented pot, I offered her my only blanket. "You'll need it more," I said. "Nights are cold this time of year." She shook her head. "You have to stay awake and keep watch. You need rest more than I do. I'll rest when the fire burns low. Then we'll share the blanket. It's large enough for 2 if we're practical about it." I started to argue, then recognized the futility. Nora Calloway was not a woman who made suggestions lightly. We sat side by side near the fire, the blanket draped across both our shoulders, and ate jerky and hard biscuits in companionable quiet. "Where are you from?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. "Philadelphia. My father was a professor of medicine. My mother died when I was young." She paused, firelight dancing across her face. "I was educated beyond what most people think proper for a woman. It made me difficult to marry off. Too opinionated, too educated, too fat." The bitterness in that last word was sharp enough to draw blood. "And you?" she continued. "You're clearly not from Montana originally. Your accent is wrong." "Kentucky," I admitted. "My father was a blacksmith. I came west after the war looking for something that didn't exist back east anymore." "Did you find it?" I thought of Mary and our daughter Sarah, buried on a hillside beneath granite markers I had carved myself. For a while. She did not press for details, respecting the boundaries we had established. Instead, she tilted her head back, studying the stars emerging in the darkening sky. "I've never seen so many stars," she said softly. "In Philadelphia, the city lights drowned them out. Out here, they're all you have some nights. When the storms come and you can't see 5 feet in any direction, you wait for them to pass and then use the stars to find your way home." "Is that what you do? Find your way home?" "Every day," I said. "Some days it's harder than others." We sat in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not the awkward quiet of strangers, but the comfortable pause of two people who had decided, however tentatively, to trust each other. The second day brought harder terrain. The trail steepened, winding through dense forest where sunlight barely penetrated. My horse, Goliath, navigated the path with practiced ease, but Nora's mount, a mare I called Patience, struggled in places. Around midday, Patience stumbled on loose rock. Nora kept her seat, but when we stopped to rest the horses, I noticed the mare favoring her right foreleg. I dismounted and ran my hands down Patience's leg, finding the problem immediately. The hoof had cracked, a small fracture that would worsen if we continued. "How bad?" Nora asked, already dismounting to inspect the damage herself. "Bad enough. She can't carry weight for at least 3 days, maybe more." I expected frustration or complaint. Instead, Nora knelt beside me, examining the hoof with a practiced eye that caught my attention. "You need to clean the crack thoroughly," she said. "Pack it with pine resin mixed with charcoal to prevent infection. Then wrap it tightly and keep weight off it." I looked at her sharply. "How do you know veterinary care?" She hesitated, color rising in her cheeks. "I worked as a nurse before. In Philadelphia, I learned basic animal medicine from one of the doctors. A nurse. I processed this new information. Educated, competent, skilled in healing. Why didn't you continue that work?" "There was an incident." Her voice hardened. "A patient died. The family blamed me, said I was careless, that my size made me clumsy. They had connections. I was blacklisted from every hospital in the city." "Were you careless?" She met my eyes, and I saw steel beneath the surface. "No, but it didn't matter. When you look like I do, people assume incompetence. They assume laziness. They assume everything wrong must be your fault." I nodded slowly, recognizing the bitter truth in her words. People judged on appearance, making assumptions that hardened into facts in their minds. "Well," I said, standing and offering her my hand, "I'm not people, and I judge by results. If you say the horse needs resin and charcoal, we'll get resin and charcoal." The surprise on her face told me she had expected dismissal, not acceptance. I helped her to her feet and gathered the materials she specified, watching as she treated Patience's hoof with steady, confident hands. She was right about the treatment. By evening the swelling had decreased and the mare was resting more comfortably. We made camp early that night, knowing we would need to move slower tomorrow. As Nora cooked beans and salt pork over the fire, I carved a crutch from a fallen branch, fashioning it to fit beneath the mare's chest to help distribute weight. "You're good with your hands," Nora observed. "Had to be. Up on the mountain, if you can't fix something yourself, it stays broken." "Is that why you live up there? To avoid depending on anyone?" I tested the crutch's strength before answering. "I live up there because I failed to save the people who mattered most, and I couldn't stand being around others who might need saving." The words came out harsher than intended, but Nora did not recoil. She simply ladled beans into 2 tin plates and handed me one. "I understand that," she said quietly. "After what happened in Philadelphia, I couldn't bear to be around sick people. Every cough, every fever, I was certain they would die and it would be my fault again. Coming west was the only way to escape that feeling." "Did it work?" She smiled sadly. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a year." The third day tested us both. With Patience unable to carry weight, Nora had to walk significant portions of the trail. I offered to let her ride Goliath, but she refused, insisting the bigger horse needed to carry our supplies. By afternoon I could see the strain in her movements. She was breathing hard, her face flushed with exertion, but she did not complain. When we stopped to rest, she simply sat on a fallen log and massaged her feet through her worn boots. I filled my canteen from a nearby stream and brought it to her. Drink. Dehydration is dangerous at this altitude. She drank deeply, then returned the canteen. How much farther? We'll reach the cabin tomorrow if we start early. But Nora, you need to tell me if you can't continue. Pride won't keep you alive up here. I can continue. Her jaw set with determination. I've survived worse than a long walk. Have you? Being fat in a world that hates fat women is its own kind of endurance trial, Mr. Thorne. Every day, every interaction, every mirror. So yes, I can walk a few more miles. The pain in her voice was raw, unguarded. I found myself responding before thinking. I don't hate it, she blinked. What? Your size. I don't hate it. I don't care about it one way or another. I met her eyes. What I care about is whether you can survive a Montana winter, whether you can think clearly in a crisis, whether you'll panic when a bear comes sniffing around the cabin. So far you've proven you can do all those things. That's what matters to me. Tears glittered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. No one has ever said anything like that to me before. Then you've been surrounded by fools. We continued walking as the sun arced across the sky. Nora's pace slowed, but she never stopped. When she stumbled on a root, I caught her elbow. When a steep section loomed ahead, I offered my arm for support. She took it without comment, and we climbed together. As twilight painted the peaks purple and gold, we crested a final ridge. Below us, nestled against the mountain's flank, stood my cabin. Nora stopped, staring. I had spent 8 years building that structure, cutting and hauling every log myself, fitting each timber with obsessive precision. It was 2 stories tall, with a wide porch wrapped around the front and stout walls designed to withstand the heaviest snows. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, courtesy of the banked fire I had left before descending to town. You built this? Nora's voice carried genuine awe. Alone? Every beam, every nail. I led the horses down the final slope. It was supposed to be for my family. The cabin's interior was warm when we entered, the fire still glowing in the massive hearth. I had prepared for this moment, cleaning and arranging things so the space would not feel too lonely or masculine. Fresh rushes covered the floor. Curtains framed the windows. Books lined shelves along one wall, volumes I had collected over years of solitary reading. Nora moved through the main room slowly, taking in details. The long table beneath the south window, the rocking chair by the fire, the kitchen area with its iron stove and orderly shelves of supplies. It's beautiful, she whispered. There's a room upstairs. I gestured toward the ladder leading to the loft. It has a real bed, mattress stuffed with goose down. You'll sleep there. Where will you sleep? Down here, by the fire. I'm used to it. She started to protest, then seemed to understand. We needed time before sharing a bedroom. Time to learn each other's rhythms and boundaries. The arrangement was practical, respectful. I showed her the upstairs room, trying to see it through her eyes. The wide bed with its patchwork quilt, the small table and chair by the window, the trunk at the foot of the bed. That trunk belonged to my wife, I said, the words catching slightly. Mary. She kept her things in it. I haven't opened it since she died. But if you need anything, blankets, clothes, whatever might be useful, you're welcome to look. Nora approached the trunk carefully, as if it might contain ghosts. How long ago did she pass? 4 years? Her and our daughter Sarah. She was 7. I gripped the doorframe, steadying myself against the familiar ache. Diphtheria swept through one winter. I rode down to town for medicine, but by the time I got back it was too late. Sarah went first. Mary followed 2 days later. I'm sorry. Nora's hand found my arm, a gentle touch. That's a terrible burden to carry. I brought them up here to keep them safe from the world's ugliness. Instead, I killed them with isolation. The confession escaped before I could cage it. If we had lived in town, near a doctor, maybe they would have survived. but I wanted to live apart, and they paid the price for my pride. You can't know that. Her grip tightened. Disease doesn't respect geography. I've seen diphtheria kill people in hospitals with the best doctors in Philadelphia. Sometimes there's nothing anyone can do. I wanted to believe her, but the guilt had roots too deep to dislodge with logic. I should have tried. You did try. You rode for medicine. You came back. You were there when they needed you. She stepped closer, forcing me to meet her eyes. Gideon, I've seen real neglect, real abandonment. What you describe is not that. It's tragedy. And tragedy is not the same as fault. Something in her certainty penetrated my defenses. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been conflating bad luck with bad judgment for 4 years, punishing myself for outcomes beyond my control. Thank you, I said quietly, for saying that. It's the truth. She released my arm and moved to the window, looking out at the darkening mountains. I've run from my own truth for too long. Maybe it's time we both stopped running. That night, after a simple meal of venison stew and bread, I gave Nora a leather satchel I had retrieved from the storage shed. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." She unbuckled the straps and gasped. Inside were medical instruments, scalpels, surgical scissors, forceps, needles and catgut for sutures, bottles of carbolic acid and laudanum, a stethoscope. These were Mary's, I explained. She was a nurse before we married, trained in St. Louis. She kept these tools in case of emergency, but she never got to use them for Sarah. My throat tightened. They've been sitting in that shed for 4 years, doing no one any good. But now, if you want them, if you can use them, they should be yours. Nora lifted a scalpel, examining the blade in the firelight. Her hands trembled slightly. "Gideon, I can't accept this. These are too valuable, too personal. Mary would want them used. She dedicated her life to healing. Having her tools rust away in a shed would dishonor that." I closed Nora's fingers around the handle. "Besides, you said you were a nurse. Maybe you can help people up here who can't get to town. Make these mountains a little less dangerous." I wasn't just a nurse. The words burst from her like a confession held too long. I was a doctor, a surgeon. I stared at her. Women can't be doctors. I know, that's why I pretended to be a man. She set the scalpel down carefully as if it might shatter. In Philadelphia, I enrolled at the medical college under the name Nathan Calloway. Cut my hair, bound my chest, deepened my voice. For 3 years, I studied surgery. I graduated top of my class. And then, during an emergency appendectomy on the governor's daughter, my binding came loose. They discovered I was a woman. What happened? They stripped my degree, charged me with fraud. My family disowned me to avoid scandal. I was banned from practicing medicine anywhere in Pennsylvania. Tears tracked down her cheeks. The governor's daughter lived. I saved her life. But because I was the wrong shape, the wrong gender, it didn't matter. I was an abomination, an embarrassment. I processed this revelation slowly, a trained surgeon, not just competent but exceptional, and society had destroyed her for the crime of being born female. "Can you still do it?" I asked. "Surgery?" "I don't know. It's been 2 years since I held a scalpel." "Then maybe it's time to find out." I gestured at the medical kit. "Because up here, on this mountain, no one cares what shape you are or what gender. They only care if you can save their life when the time comes, and I suspect that time will come sooner than either of us wants." Nora wiped her eyes, composure returning. "You really believe that? That it doesn't matter?" "I've seen enough death to know it's the great equalizer. When you're bleeding out, you don't care if the hands stopping the bleeding belong to a man or woman, thin or fat, white or brown. You only care that they're skilled, and yours are." She looked at the medical instruments again, this time with something like hunger. "If someone does need help, if an emergency comes, I'll do what I can. But Gideon, you need to understand, if I fail, if someone dies, the blame will fall on me again. It always does." "Then we'll carry that blame together," I said, "because you won't be alone anymore. not up here. The next morning, I woke to find Nora already awake, organizing the medical supplies on a shelf she had cleared in the kitchen area. She had sorted everything by type and use, creating a makeshift dispensary. "Coffee's ready," she said without looking up, "and I found some eggs in your henhouse. I made breakfast." I rubbed sleep from my eyes, surprised by how deeply I had rested. Usually, nightmares woke me before dawn. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to contribute. This is my home now, too, isn't it?" "It is." We ate scrambled eggs and toasted bread, falling into an easy rhythm. After breakfast, I showed Nora around the property, the henhouse and its dozen laying birds, the smokehouse where I cured meat, the root cellar dug deep into the hillside, cool enough to preserve vegetables through summer, the small barn where Goliath and Patience could shelter during storms. "You're completely self-sufficient," Nora observed. "You could live up here for years without ever going to town." That was the idea. After Mary and Sarah died, I couldn't stand being around people. Everyone wanted to offer condolences or advice or pity. I wanted silence. And now I'm realizing silence can be its own kind of prison. I led her back toward the cabin. "Having you here, it's different. Not unwelcome." She smiled, a real smile this time, not the guarded expression she wore in public. I'll take "not unwelcome" as high praise from a hermit. As we approached the cabin, I noticed something on the porch, a bundle wrapped in oilcloth tied with rough twine. I had not left it there. "Stay back," I told Nora, my hand going to the knife at my belt. I approached cautiously, scanning the tree line for movement. Nothing. Whoever had left this was already gone. I cut the twine and unfolded the oilcloth. Inside was a letter sealed with red wax. The seal bore a familiar mark, a double W intertwined, Weatherby's mark. My stomach sank as I broke the seal and read. The letter was brief, written in Weatherby's elegant script. "Gideon, your debt to me is paid, but I find myself owed a new debt by you. Your wife is practicing medicine without license or authority. This is illegal in Montana territory. Unless you wish to see her arrested and tried, you will pay me 50% of any fees she collects from patients. Consider this a business arrangement between partners. Refuse, and I will have the marshal escort her to trial in Helena. You have 1 week to decide. C.W." I crumpled the letter, rage burning through my veins. Weatherby had known. Somehow, he had known about Nora's medical background. Perhaps he had investigated her before she even arrived, researching each bride to extract maximum value. "What is it?" Nora asked, seeing my expression. I handed her the letter. She read it, color draining from her face. "He knows," she whispered. "How does he know?" "Weatherby makes it his business to know everything that might be profitable. He probably had investigators checking backgrounds on all the brides." I paced the porch, mind racing. "He's threatening to have you arrested unless we pay him protection money." "Then I won't practice. I'll just be your wife, nothing more." "No." The word came out harder than intended. "No, we don't surrender to blackmail. That's what men like Weatherby count on. Fear and compliance." "But Gideon, if he reports me, I'll go to prison. You'll be implicated too for harboring a fraud." "Let him try." I met her eyes, decision crystallizing. "Weatherby thinks he holds all the cards. But he's forgotten something important." "What?" "He came up this mountain once, years ago, to survey timber rights. He got lost, wandered for 2 days without food or water. I found him half dead from exposure. I could have left him to die. No one would have known. But I saved him, carried him down to my cabin, nursed him back to health. He swore he owed me his life." "You said you collected that debt when you bought me." I lied. I smiled grimly. "I paid him cash money, same as any other customer. The debt is still outstanding. And Cyrus Weatherby is a man who prides himself on honor among thieves. If I call in that debt publicly, in front of witnesses, he'll have to acknowledge it or lose face in Copper Ridge." Nora shook her head. "That's a gamble. What if he denies it? Then we go to war." I took her hands, feeling their strength. "Nora, I brought you up here promising safety. I meant it. Weatherby will not touch you while I'm alive, and I'm very difficult to kill." She searched my face, looking for certainty. Finding it, she nodded. "What do we do? First, we wait. Let Weatherby think we're considering his offer. Meanwhile, you practice your skills. Stay sharp, because when this comes to a head, we'll need every advantage." "Practice on what?" As if in answer, a shout echoed up from the valley below. A man's voice, desperate and ragged. "Help! Someone help, please!" I grabbed my rifle and ran toward the sound, Nora close behind. We found him 100 yards down the trail, a man in his 30s, covered in blood, dragging himself uphill on his elbows. His left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, bone visible through torn flesh. "Tree fell," he gasped. "Crushed my leg. I crawled, looking for help, saw your smoke." Nora was already kneeling beside him, her hands moving with professional certainty. She examined the wound, her face grave. "Compound fracture. The bone's shattered. He's losing blood fast." She looked up at me. "We need to get him inside, now. And Gideon, I'm going to need those medical instruments." Together, we carried the man into the cabin, laying him on the kitchen table. Nora worked with focused intensity, cutting away his pants leg, exposing the full extent of the damage. "What's your name?" she asked him. "Marcus. Marcus Webb. I'm a miner, work the silver claims east of here." "Well, Marcus, I'm going to save your leg, but this will hurt worse than anything you've ever felt. Gideon, I need you to hold him down." For the next 4 hours, I watched Nora transform. The uncertain woman from the town square disappeared, replaced by a surgeon of formidable skill. She cleaned the wound with carbolic acid. She set the bone fragments with delicate precision. She stitched torn muscle and flesh with tiny, perfect sutures. And through it all, Marcus screamed and thrashed while I held him still, my own muscles burning from the effort. Finally, she stepped back, blood-stained and exhausted. "It's done. The bone is set. If infection doesn't take him, he'll walk again, but he needs rest, weeks of it." Marcus had passed out from pain, his breathing shallow but steady. "You saved him," I said, awed by what I had witnessed. "I did my job," but pride flickered in her eyes. God, I forgot how much I missed this. The focus, the purpose. "You're incredible." She looked at me, really looked, and something shifted between us. A barrier crumbling, a connection forming. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing I could do it." Before I could respond, Marcus stirred, eyes fluttering open. He focused on Nora with difficulty. You're the doctor?" "I am." "Thank you. Thank you." Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. "My wife, we have 2 children. If I'd lost my leg, lost my ability to work, they would have starved. You saved my family." Nora's own eyes glistened. "Rest now. You're safe." As Marcus drifted back to sleep, I pulled Nora aside. "He'll tell people what you did. Word will spread. I know. Weatherby will hear about it. I know that, too." She squared her shoulders. "But I can't hide anymore, Gideon. I'm a doctor. This is what I do. If Weatherby wants to fight about it, then we fight." I felt something unfamiliar rising in my chest, something I had not felt in 4 years. Hope. "Then we fight together," I said. And in that moment, standing in my cabin with a wounded man between us and blood on our hands, Nora Calloway and I became something more than a transaction. We became partners. The war with Cyrus Weatherby had begun. Marcus Webb stayed with us for 3 days before he was strong enough to be moved. During that time, Nora tended him with the dedication of a battlefield surgeon, changing bandages, checking for infection, adjusting his splint as the swelling decreased. I watched her work, fascinated by the transformation that came over her when she entered what she called her medical mind. The self-consciousness about her body vanished. The hesitation in her voice disappeared. She became purely functional, purely competent. On the morning of the 4th day, Marcus sat up without assistance for the first time. "Doc Calloway," he said, the title coming naturally despite knowing she was technically unlicensed. "I don't have much money, but what I have is yours. You saved my life and my livelihood." Nora shook her head firmly. I don't want payment, Marcus. Just promise me something. Anything. When you go back to town, tell people the truth about what happened here. Don't embellish. Don't make me sound like a miracle worker. Just tell them a doctor treated you, and you lived. Marcus frowned, confused by the request. That's all you want? Just the truth? The truth is more valuable than gold in my experience. She helped him stand, supporting his weight as he tested his injured leg. Most people prefer comfortable lies, but lies are what got me run out of Philadelphia. I won't build a new life on the same foundation that destroyed my old one. I understood what she was doing. By insisting on plain truth, she was forcing people to confront the fact that a fat woman society had deemed worthless, possessed skills that saved lives. It was a quiet form of rebellion, and I admired the strategic thinking behind it. We loaded Marcus onto Patience, the mare's hoof now healed enough to carry light weight. I would ride part way down the mountain with him, ensuring he reached the main trail safely. Before we left, Marcus clasped Nora's hand. My wife's name is Catherine. We have a son, Benjamin, and a daughter, Emma. They're going to hear about you, Doc, and they're going to know that you're the reason their father came home. After they departed, Nora stood on the porch, watching until they disappeared into the trees. I found her there an hour later when I returned, her expression distant. What are you thinking? I asked. That I forgot what it feels like to be useful, to have purpose beyond simply existing. She turned to me. In Philadelphia, after they took away my medical degree, I spent a year just surviving, working as a seamstress, a laundress, anything that would keep me fed and housed. But I was hollow inside, empty. Coming west was supposed to be an escape, but really, I was just looking for a new place to be hollow. And now I remember why I became a doctor in the first place, the moment when someone's pain stops. When you see life return to eyes that were fading, that moment makes everything else worthwhile. She smiled, but sadness lingered at its edges. I just hope I can hold on to it this time. You will, because you're not alone anymore. I gestured at the cabin behind us. This place, it's not just mine now, it's ours. And whatever comes, we face it together. She leaned against the porch railing, and I stood beside her, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. The morning sun painted the valley below in shades of gold and green, the kind of beauty that made you forget, just for a moment, that the world could be cruel. Gideon, she said quietly, thank you for giving me a chance to be more than what people assumed I was. You were always more. I just provided the space for you to remember it. The next week passed in a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Nora organized the cabin with systematic efficiency, creating designated areas for medical supplies, cooking, storage. She took inventory of everything we owned, making lists of what we needed to restock before winter. I spent my days hunting, checking trap lines, cutting firewood for the cold months ahead. But I also began teaching Nora the skills she would need to survive if something happened to me. How to track game through the forest, how to read weather signs in the clouds and wind, how to identify edible plants and which ones would kill you if ingested. She was a quick learner, absorbing information with the same intensity she brought to medicine. One afternoon, I handed her my spare rifle, a lighter model more suited to her frame. You need to know how to shoot, I said, not just for hunting, but for protection. Bears come around sometimes, and bears aren't the most dangerous predators in these mountains. We set up targets at varying distances. I showed her proper stance, how to control her breathing, how to squeeze the trigger rather than pull it. Her first few shots went wide, but she adjusted quickly, applying the same analytical approach she used in surgery. By the end of the afternoon, she was hitting targets at 50 yards. You're a natural, I told her, genuinely impressed. I'm just good at understanding how systems work. Guns are simpler than human anatomy. She lowered the rifle, a satisfied smile on her face, though considerably louder. That evening, as we prepared dinner together, she asked about my life before Montana. I found myself talking more than I had in years, telling stories about growing up in Kentucky, about my father's blacksmith shop, about joining the army during the war and seeing things no person should witness. "Is that why you came west?" she asked. "To escape the memories?" "Partly, but also because I wanted to build something. The war destroyed so much. I thought maybe out here, in empty land, I could create instead of destroy." I stirred the stew pot, memories surfacing like bodies from a river. Then Mary died, and I realized destruction follows you no matter how far you run. But you're still here, still building, because giving up would mean their deaths were the end of the story, and I owe them a better ending than that. Nora reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was warm, solid, real. "I think you're writing that better ending right now." The knock came 6 days after Marcus left. 3 sharp raps on the cabin door just after dawn. I opened it to find a woman in her 30s, worn face tight with worry, holding the hand of a boy who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. The child was pale, his breathing labored, his lips tinged blue. "Please," the woman said, voice breaking. "Marcus Webb told me there was a doctor up here. My son, he can't breathe right. Started yesterday, getting worse. The doctor in town says it's just a cold, but I know it's more. Please, can you help?" Nora appeared at my shoulder. One look at the child and she was in motion. "Bring him inside, quickly. What's his name?" "Timothy. I'm his mother, Sarah." Nora examined Timothy with swift efficiency, listening to his chest, checking his throat, assessing his color. Her expression grew grave. "It's croup," she said. "His airway is swelling. If we don't reduce the inflammation soon, he'll suffocate." She looked at me. "Gideon, I need you to boil water, lots of it. We need to create steam." I set every pot we owned to boil, while Nora created a makeshift steam tent using blankets draped over chairs near the fireplace. She held Timothy in the humid air, rubbing his back, speaking softly to keep him calm. "You're going to be fine, sweetheart. Just breathe slow. That's it. Slow and steady." Sarah watched with tears streaming down her face. "The town doctor, he just gave Timothy a tonic and sent us away. Said I was being hysterical." "You weren't hysterical. You were right." Nora's voice carried quiet anger. "A mother knows when something is seriously wrong with her child. Doctors who dismiss that intuition are fools." After 20 minutes in the steam, Timothy's breathing eased. Color returned to his lips. He fell asleep in Nora's arms, exhausted from the struggle. "He'll need to stay for a few hours," Nora told Sarah. "The inflammation can return. I want to monitor him." Sarah nodded, relief making her legs weak. I guided her to a chair, offered her coffee and bread. She ate mechanically, unable to take her eyes off her sleeping son. "How much do I owe you?" she asked Nora. "I don't have much, but I'll find a way to pay." "You owe me nothing, except to take care of yourself. When did you last eat a full meal?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. Nora packed food into a basket: bread, dried meat, eggs, preserved vegetables. "Take this. You can't care for Timothy if you're collapsing from hunger." "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, it's practical medicine. A child needs a healthy mother." Nora's tone left no room for argument. "Besides, Gideon hunts more game than we can eat. The food will spoil if someone doesn't use it." By midday, Timothy was breathing normally. Sarah left with her son, the basket of food, and instructions to return immediately if his condition worsened. She also left with tears of gratitude and a promise to tell everyone she knew about the doctor who cared more about healing than payment. After they departed, I found Nora sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. "That's the second person you've saved," I said. "Word is definitely spreading now." "I know, and Weatherby will hear about it." She looked up at me. "Gideon, what if he makes good on his threat? What if the marshal comes?" "Then we deal with it. But I've been thinking about Weatherby's letter. He gave us a week to decide, but he never specified what happens after that week. Men like him thrive on vague threats, because vague threats keep people paralyzed." "So what do? We call his bluff, publicly." I pulled a chair beside hers. "Tomorrow, I'm going to town. I'm going to stand in the middle of the square and announce that Weatherby owes me a life debt, that I'm calling it in to protect your right to practice medicine. He'll either have to acknowledge the debt or deny it in front of witnesses. And if he denies it, then everyone in Copper Ridge will know he's a man who doesn't honor his word. In frontier towns, reputation is currency. He'll lose business, respect, influence. It might not stop him completely, but it will wound him. Nora considered this, turning the strategy over in her mind. It's risky. You'll be making an enemy of a powerful man. I made that enemy the moment I bought you. This just makes the conflict open instead of hidden, and I prefer enemies I can see. She reached out, her fingers brushing my jaw, the touch tentative but deliberate. Why are you doing this? You could give me back to Weatherby. Save yourself the trouble. Because giving you back would mean I'm the kind of man who trades people like property when they become inconvenient. And I'm trying very hard not to be that kind of man anymore. I covered her hand with mine. Also because somewhere in the last 2 weeks, you stopped being a transaction and became someone I actually give a damn about. The words hung between us, more intimate than a kiss. I give a damn about you too, she whispered. We sat like that, hands touching, fire crackling, until the sun set and darkness claimed the mountains. The next morning I rode down to Copper Ridge alone. Nora wanted to come, but I insisted she stay at the cabin. If violence erupted, I needed to know she was safe. The town square was busy when I arrived, miners and merchants conducting their daily business. I tied Goliath to the hitching post outside the general store and walked to the center of the square. "Cyrus Weatherby," I called, my voice carrying across the open space. "I need a word." Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Weatherby emerged from his office, his expression carefully neutral. "Gideon, what brings you down from your mountain?" "A debt. The debt you owe me for saving your life 5 years ago. I'm calling it in." His eyes narrowed. "I thought we settled that debt when you bought the Calloway woman." "No, I paid you cash money for her, $500. The debt remains unpaid." I kept my voice level, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Now I'm asking you to honor it. Publicly." Weatherby's jaw tightened. He was trapped, and he knew it. To deny the debt would destroy his reputation. To acknowledge it meant losing control of the situation. "What exactly are you asking for?" he said carefully. "My wife is a trained physician. She's been helping people who can't afford your overpriced town doctor. I'm asking you to leave her alone. Let her practice in peace. In exchange, I'll consider your life debt paid in full." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people nodded, including a few I recognized as patients Nora had treated. Weatherby's face reddened. "Your wife is practicing medicine without a license. That's illegal." "Is it?" I stepped closer. "Or is it only illegal if she charges money? Because Dr. Calloway doesn't accept payment. She treats people for free. So unless the law prohibits charity, she's broken no statutes." More murmurs, louder now. People were paying attention, thinking about the implications. A new voice cut through the noise. "Gideon's right about the law." Marshal Raymond Kane stepped forward from the crowd. He was older than me by 15 years, gray-haired and weather-beaten, but his eyes were sharp as flint. "I've reviewed the territorial statutes," Kane continued. "It's illegal to practice medicine for profit without a license, but providing free medical care is not explicitly prohibited. Might be a gray area worth testing in court, but it's not clear-cut." Weatherby's expression darkened. "Marshal, surely you don't support unlicensed practitioners setting up shop in our territory." "I support people not dying because they can't afford a doctor." Kane's tone was flat, uncompromising. "And I support men honoring their debts. Gideon Thorne saved your life, Weatherby. Everyone here knows it. So either acknowledge the debt and let his wife be, or admit publicly that your word means nothing." The crowd's mood shifted. I could feel it, like wind changing direction before a storm. They were waiting to see if Weatherby would choose honor or profit. He chose neither. Instead, he smiled coldly. "Very well, Gideon. I'll acknowledge the debt. Your wife can continue her little charity operation." He paused, letting the concession sink in. "But understand something. Accidents happen in the mountains. Supplies get lost. People disappear. You're making powerful enemies for the sake of a woman who will never truly be accepted in polite society. Is she really worth it? The threat was clear, thinly veiled but unmistakable. She's worth more than you'll ever understand, I said quietly. And if accidents start happening, Weatherby, remember that I know these mountains better than any man alive. Accidents can go both ways. We locked eyes, and in that moment, the unspoken rules of engagement were established. This was war now, fought in shadows and implications, where neither side could afford direct confrontation. Weatherby turned and walked back to his office without another word. The crowd dispersed slowly, people glancing at me with a mix of respect and concern. Marshal Kane approached, his expression unreadable. "That was bold," he said. "Possibly stupid, but bold." I had to make a stand. "I know, and for what it's worth, I'm glad you did." Kane lowered his voice. "Weatherby's been bleeding this town dry for years, overcharging for medicine, running up debts, foreclosing on property. But he's got connections with the territorial governor. Nobody's been able to touch him." "You sound like you've got personal reasons for disliking him." Kane's face hardened. "My wife died 10 years ago. She was sick, needed medicine. Weatherby's doctor gave her the wrong prescription, said it was an honest mistake. She died in agony." He paused. "I could never prove it was deliberate, but I've always suspected he wanted our land. After she passed, he tried to buy it for a fraction of its value." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be careful. Men like Weatherby don't forgive being humiliated." Kane glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "There's something else you should know. Weatherby's been importing opium from San Francisco, selling it to miners as medicine for pain. I've been gathering evidence for months, but I need witnesses willing to testify. Most are too afraid or too addicted." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if your wife is as good as people say, she might start treating some of Weatherby's opium customers. Addicts trying to quit. People suffering from his so-called medicine. They might talk to her, trust her, and if they do, we might finally have the witnesses we need to bring him down." I absorbed this information, understanding the larger game being played. "You want to use Nora as bait. I want to use the truth as a weapon. Your wife deals in truth, so do I. Together, we might be able to end Weatherby's reign." Kane met my eyes. "But only if you're willing to take the risk. I'll talk to her. It's her decision." "Fair enough." Kane tipped his hat. "One more thing. I'll ride by your place periodically, just to check that everything's all right. Consider it unofficial protection." After Kane left, I purchased supplies and headed back up the mountain. My mind churned with possibilities and dangers, weighing options against consequences. When I reached the cabin, Nora was waiting on the porch. She read my expression instantly. What happened? I told her everything, Weatherby's veiled threats, Kane's revelation about the opium trade, the potential to gather evidence that could destroy our enemy. She listened without interrupting, her medical mind processing information like symptoms leading to diagnosis. "So Kane wants me to become a conduit for witnesses," she said when I finished. "Treat addicts, gain their trust, convince them to testify. Only if you're willing. I won't ask you to put yourself in danger." She walked to the porch railing, looking out at the valley. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "When I was in medical school, studying in secret as Nathan Calloway, I treated charity patients in the poorest parts of Philadelphia. People addicted to laudanum, morphine, patent medicines laced with cocaine. I saw what addiction does, how it destroys families, kills slowly, leaves nothing but hollowed-out shells where people used to be." She turned to face me. "If Weatherby is selling opium disguised as medicine, he's creating addicts deliberately, making people dependent so they keep buying. That's not just business, Gideon. That's evil. And I didn't become a doctor to ignore evil when I see it." "You're saying yes." "I'm saying if addicts come to me for help, I'll treat them. And if they want to talk about where they got their drugs, I'll listen. And if that information helps Marshal Kane put Weatherby in prison, Then that's justice. She crossed to me, placing both hands on my chest. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise that if this gets too dangerous, if Weatherby moves against us directly, you'll let me go. Send me away. Don't sacrifice yourself trying to protect me. I can't promise that. Gideon, no. I covered her hands with mine. I've already lost one family. I won't deliberately lose another. We're in this together, Nora, all the way, whatever comes. Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. You're a stubborn man. I learned from a stubborn woman. She laughed, the sound breaking the tension. Then, surprising us both, she rose on her toes and kissed me. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce, desperate, full of all the words we had not yet said. My arms went around her, pulling her close, and for a long moment the world contracted to just the two of us, just this connection. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nora whispered, I think I'm falling in love with you, Gideon Thorne. I think I've been falling since the moment you looked at me in that town square and didn't flinch. Then we're both fools. The best kind of fools. 3 weeks passed. Spring deepened into early summer, the mountains exploding with wildflowers and new growth. Patients came steadily to our cabin, word of mouth spreading Nora's reputation throughout the region. She treated everything from broken bones to infected wounds, difficult births to childhood fevers. I assisted when needed, learning medical terminology and procedures, becoming a competent nurse under her patient instruction, and slowly, addicts began to appear. The first was a miner named Thomas Riley, his hands shaking so badly he could barely speak. He had been taking Weatherby's Wonder Tonic for back pain, $2 a bottle, and now couldn't function without it. Nora examined him, recognizing the signs immediately. Mr. Riley, that tonic contains opium. You're addicted. Stopping suddenly could kill you. I know, but I can't keep paying. I've spent my savings, my wages, everything. His voice broke. Doc, can you help me? I can help you withdraw slowly. It will take weeks. It will be painful, but you can survive it if you're willing to endure. Anything. I'll do anything to be free of this. Nora treated him over the course of a month, carefully reducing his dosage while managing the withdrawal symptoms. During lucid moments, Thomas talked about how Weatherby's doctor had prescribed the tonic freely, never mentioning addiction, about how many other miners were similarly trapped, about the deaths that had been ruled accidents but might have been overdoses. Marshal Kane visited regularly, ostensibly to check on our safety, but really to hear what we were learning. Each visit, the picture grew clearer. Weatherby was running a systematic operation, creating addicts and profiting from their dependency. We're close, Kane said during one visit. 3 more witnesses willing to testify, and I can get a warrant. But they need to feel safe first, protected. What can we do? Nora asked. Keep doing what you're doing. Build trust. Show people there's a way out. Kane paused. But be careful. Weatherby knows what you're doing, even if he can't prove it yet. He's starting to feel cornered. And cornered animals are the most dangerous. That night, as Nora and I lay together in the bed we now shared, she traced patterns on my chest with her fingertips. Are you afraid? She asked. Terrified, I admitted. But not of Weatherby. I'm afraid of losing you, of this happiness being temporary. Nothing is permanent, Gideon. We both know that. Mary and Sarah taught you. Philadelphia taught me. All we can do is hold on to good things while we have them. Then I'm holding on with everything I have. She kissed my shoulder. Me too. The attack came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month after my confrontation with Weatherby. I was out checking trap lines when I heard the shot. A single rifle crack echoing off the mountains, coming from the direction of the cabin. I ran, crashing through underbrush, heart pounding with primal fear. Please, not again. Don't take her too. I burst into the clearing to find Nora standing on the porch, her rifle raised, smoke curling from the barrel. 50 yards away, a man lay on the ground, clutching his shoulder and screaming. What happened? I demanded. taking in the scene. "He came up the trail," Nora said, voice shaking but controlled. "Said he was injured, needed help, but when I came out to examine him, he pulled a knife. Tried to grab me. Said Weatherby sent him to give me a warning." The man on the ground was young, maybe 20, his face twisted with pain and fear. I recognized him as one of Weatherby's employees from the mining office. "She shot me," he wailed. "The crazy bitch shot me." I walked over to him, looked at the wound. Nora had hit him in the shoulder precisely where the injury would be painful but not fatal. Surgical precision, even in self-defense. "You're lucky she's a better person than you deserve," I said. "If it had been me, you'd be dead. Now tell me exactly what Weatherby told you to do." Through tears and moaning, he confessed. He was supposed to scare Nora, rough her up, make her afraid to continue treating patients. Weatherby had paid him $50, promised him more if he made it look like an accident. "Marshal Kane needs to hear this," Nora said. "No, please," the man begged. "Weatherby will kill me if I talk." "Then you better hope Kane can protect you, because your other option is bleeding out on my property while I go inside and have lunch." We bound his wound and tied him to a tree. I rode to town and returned with Marshal Kane, who arrested the man for assault. Kane also brought 2 deputies as escorts, taking the situation seriously now that violence had escalated. "This changes things," Kane said. "Attempted assault gives me grounds to bring Weatherby in for questioning. It's not enough to convict him, but it's a start." "Be careful," I warned. "He's desperate now. Desperate men make mistakes, but they also take everyone down with them." After Kane left with his prisoner, Nora and I stood on the porch, the adrenaline finally fading. "I've never shot anyone before," she said quietly. "In medical school, we learned anatomy, where to cut to heal. But using that knowledge to harm, even in self-defense, it felt wrong." "You saved your own life. That's never wrong. Intellectually, I know that. But my hands are still shaking." I held her close, feeling the tremors running through her body. "You're the strongest person I've ever known. You faced down danger with a clear head. You protected yourself. I'm so damn proud of you." She buried her face in my chest. "I'm tired of fighting, Gideon. Tired of always being under threat. Why can't people just let us live?" "Because we're challenging the order they depend on. Weatherby built his power on fear and dependency. We're offering an alternative. That makes us dangerous to him. How does this end? With him in prison or us dead? There's no middle ground anymore." She looked up at me, fear and determination warring in her expression. "Then we make sure it's the first option." That night we barely slept. Every sound brought us alert, hands reaching for weapons. But the forest remained quiet, and dawn came without further incident. 2 days later, a rider arrived. It was Marcus Webb, the first patient Nora had saved, now fully recovered and walking without a limp. "Doc Calloway," he said, dismounting quickly. "I heard what happened, about Weatherby's man attacking you. I want to help." "Help how?" Nora asked. Marcus reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were glass bottles, each labeled in Weatherby's distinctive script. "I was addicted to his opium tonic. Been clean for a month now, thanks to you. But I kept the bottles, kept the receipts showing I bought them from Weatherby's store. I'll testify. I'll tell everyone what he did to me and dozens of others." Nora took the box with trembling hands. "Marcus, this could put you in danger." "I know, but you saved me when no one else would. You didn't charge me money I didn't have. You treated me like a human being, not a profit source." He stood straighter. "I got a wife and kids. They deserve to grow up in a town where men like Weatherby don't run everything. If my testimony helps, then I'm willing to take the risk." Marshal Kane arrived within hours of being summoned. When he saw Marcus's evidence, his weathered face broke into the first genuine smile I had seen from him. "This is it," he said. "Physical evidence linking Weatherby to opium distribution. Combined with Marcus's testimony and the statements from the man who attacked you, I can get a warrant. We can arrest him." "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow. I need to ride to Helena tonight, present this to the territorial judge. If he agrees, and he will, I'll have the warrant by morning." Kane looked at us seriously. "But you need to understand, once I arrest Weatherby, there's no going back. He has friends in high places. This will turn into a legal battle that could take months." "We understand," Nora said. "Do it." After Kane left, the three of us sat together, the weight of what was coming settling over us. "Whatever happens," Marcus said, "I'm grateful I met you both. You gave me my life back. That's worth fighting for." The next morning, Marshal Kane returned with a warrant and 4 deputies. They rode into Copper Ridge and arrested Cyrus Weatherby in front of his office, in full view of the town. The news reached us by noon. Weatherby was in custody, charged with illegal opium distribution, conspiracy to commit assault, and fraud. His assets were frozen pending trial. His business empire was crumbling, but we knew it was not over. Men like Weatherby had resources, lawyers, connections. The battle was just beginning. That evening, as the sun set over Thunder Peak, Nora and I stood together on our porch, watching the light fade from gold to purple to black. "Do you think we'll win?" she asked. "I think we've already won the important battle," I said. "We chose to stand together instead of running separately. We fought for what's right, even when it was dangerous. Whatever happens in court, we've already proven we're stronger than fear." She leaned into me, and I wrapped my arms around her, feeling the solid reality of her presence. No longer a transaction, no longer just survival. This was partnership. This was love. "Gideon," she whispered, "I want to marry you, properly. Not just as a legal arrangement, but as a real marriage. Will you have me?" "I've been yours since the moment you stood in that town square with your head held high despite the world's cruelty. Yes, Nora Calloway, I'll marry you again, forever." We kissed as stars emerged overhead, the mountains standing witness to promises made under open sky. The war with Weatherby would continue. The trial would be difficult, but we had something he could never understand or defeat. We had each other, and that was enough. The trial was set for 6 weeks out, enough time for both sides to prepare their cases. Weatherby sat in the Copper Ridge jail, but his reach extended far beyond those bars. Within days of his arrest, strange things began happening. Our supply orders from town were delayed or lost entirely. Merchants who had been friendly suddenly refused to sell to us. Anonymous letters arrived at the cabin, crude threats scrawled in shaky handwriting. Someone poisoned our henhouse, killing half our laying birds. Traps I had set for game were sprung or stolen. Marshal Kane increased his patrols, but he could not be everywhere at once. The harassment was designed to wear us down, to make us afraid, to convince us that withdrawing our testimony was easier than enduring constant siege. But Nora had spent her life enduring, and I had learned patience in grief. We held firm. The patients kept coming too, despite the risks. Word had spread that Doc Calloway would treat anyone, regardless of ability to pay, and desperate people would walk through fire for that kind of care. Each person who climbed our mountain and left healed was another small victory against the fear Weatherby tried to spread. One morning, 3 weeks before the trial, a young woman appeared on our doorstep. She was thin to the point of gauntness, her dress hanging loose on her frame, dark circles shadowing her eyes. "Please," she said, swaying on her feet, "I need help. I'm trying to stop taking the medicine, but I can't. I can't think, can't eat. Everything hurts." Nora caught her as she collapsed, guiding her inside with practiced efficiency. I recognized the signs now after treating so many addicts. Opium withdrawal, advanced stage, dangerous. "What's your name?" Nora asked gently, settling the woman on the couch. "Abigail Foster. I worked at Weatherby's office as a secretary. He gave me the tonic when I complained of headaches, said it was harmless. Now I need it just to get through the day, but I can't afford it anymore since he was arrested." Over the next 72 hours, Nora nursed Abigail through the worst of the withdrawal. I had seen this process before, but it never got easier. The shaking, the vomiting, the delirium. Abigail screamed things that made no sense, saw horrors that did not exist, begged for death to end the suffering. But Nora never left her side. She held Abigail through the worst moments, administered carefully measured doses of medication to ease the symptoms without creating new dependency, and spoke in a constant stream of encouragement. "You're stronger than the drug. You're fighting back. You're winning." On the third night, Abigail's fever broke. She opened her eyes, truly lucid for the first time, and looked at Nora with something approaching wonder. "You saved me. You saved yourself. I just gave you the tools." When Abigail was strong enough to sit up and eat solid food, she told us everything. How Weatherby had deliberately recruited young women with few resources, given them addictive tonics, then used their dependency to control them. How he had forced several into prostitution to pay for their medicine. How at least 2 women had died from overdoses that were covered up as natural causes. "I'll testify," Abigail said, her voice gaining strength. "I'll tell the court everything. But Dr. Calloway, you need to know something. Weatherby has been sending letters from jail to his associates, to people in Helena with connections to the territorial government. He's building a defense, and part of that defense is destroying you." "Destroying me how?" "He's spreading rumors, saying you're a fraud, that you've killed patients through incompetence, that you seduced Gideon Thorne to avoid being sent back east. He's trying to turn public opinion against you before the trial even starts." Nora's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "Let him spread his poison. The truth has a way of rising above lies." But I saw the fear in her eyes when Abigail left. The old wounds from Philadelphia were reopening. Memories of being destroyed by false accusations bleeding into the present. That night, I found her sitting by the fire, staring into the flames with unseeing eyes. "Talk to me," I said, settling beside her. "What if it happens again?" Her voice was small, fragile, in a way I had not heard since the early days. "What if Weatherby's lies take root? What if people believe I'm dangerous, incompetent? What if everyone I've helped forgets the good because of his poison? Then we remind them. We bring every patient you've saved to testify. Marcus with his healed leg, Sarah and her son Timothy, who would have suffocated without you, Thomas Riley, free from addiction, Abigail, who just left here with her life reclaimed. We show the truth in flesh and blood. And if that's not enough?" I took her hands, forcing her to meet my eyes. "Then we leave. We take our skills and go somewhere Weatherby's influence can't reach. Oregon, California, Canada, if necessary. But Nora, I will not let him destroy you. Not again. Not ever." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm so tired of running." Then we stand, together, and we trust that the people who matter will see the truth. I pulled her close, feeling her shake with suppressed sobs. "You are the most remarkable person I've ever known. You've saved lives, changed lives, including mine. That's real. His lies are just air." She clung to me, and we sat together until the fire burned low and her breathing steadied into sleep. I carried her upstairs to bed, tucked her in, and spent the rest of the night at the window with my rifle, watching for threats that might emerge from the darkness. Marshal Kane arrived at dawn with news that turned my blood to ice. "Weatherby made bail," he said without preamble. "A lawyer from Helena posted bond. $20,000. He's out." "How is that possible?" Nora demanded, now awake and standing beside me. "You said the charges were serious." "They are. But his lawyer argued he's not a flight risk, that he has deep roots in the community, that pretrial detention was excessive." The judge agreed. Kane's expression was grim. "He's required to stay in Copper Ridge until the trial, but otherwise he's free. And Gideon, I'm worried. Men in his position don't usually post bail just to wait peacefully for trial. They post bail to tie up loose ends." "He's coming for us." "I think so, and I can't provide round-the-clock protection. I don't have the manpower. Best I can do is check on you twice a day and respond quickly if you signal for help." After Kane left, Nora and I took inventory of our defenses. We had 2 rifles, 3 pistols, ammunition enough for a sustained fight, and the natural fortress of the cabin itself. The structure was solid, built to withstand Montana winters, which meant walls thick enough to stop most bullets. The porch provided good sight lines down the trail. The root cellar offered a last refuge if the cabin was overrun. "You know how to shoot now," I said, "and you know these mountains. If something happens to me, you run. Don't try to fight alone. Just run to Kane and let him handle it." "We already had this conversation. I'm not leaving you." "Nora, please, be practical. If we both die, Weatherby wins. But if you survive, you can testify. You can finish this." She gripped my shirt, pulling me close. "Listen to me, Gideon Thorne. I spent my whole life being told I was too much. Too fat, too smart, too ambitious. I made myself smaller to fit into spaces that didn't want me. But you gave me a place where I could be exactly who I am, all of me, without apology. I will not abandon that. I will not abandon you. We stand together or we fall together. Those are the only options I'll accept." I saw the absolute certainty in her eyes and knew argument was futile. So instead I kissed her, pouring every ounce of love and fear and desperate hope into that connection. "Then we prepare for war," I said. We spent the day fortifying. I reinforced the shutters, creating firing ports that allowed us to shoot while remaining covered. Nora organized medical supplies in multiple locations so we could treat wounds no matter where we ended up. We stockpiled food and water in the cabin and the root cellar. I taught Nora the emergency signals to use if she needed to alert Kane. 3 rifle shots in quick succession, repeated twice. As evening approached, Marcus Webb arrived with unexpected reinforcements. He brought 5 other men, all former patients of Nora's, all armed and determined. "Doc," Marcus said, "we heard Weatherby made bail. We figured you might need help defending this place." "I can't ask you to risk your lives," Nora protested. "You're not asking. We're volunteering. You gave us back our health, our dignity. Some of us you freed from addiction that was killing us. We're not going to let Weatherby hurt you for doing good." I gripped Marcus's shoulder, gratitude making speech difficult. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when this is over and we're all still breathing." The men positioned themselves around the property, creating a perimeter. We settled in to wait, not knowing if Weatherby would come tonight, tomorrow, or never. The uncertainty was its own torture. Midnight came and went. Nothing. Then just before dawn, when exhaustion makes minds slow and eyes heavy, they attacked. The first indication was fire. Torches arcing through the darkness, landing on the roof, on the porch, trying to ignite the structure, but I had soaked everything in water before nightfall, anticipating this exact tactic. The flames sputtered and died. Then came the gunfire. Muzzle flashes in the trees, bullets slamming into walls and shutters. I counted at least 8 shooters, probably more. Weatherby had brought an army. "Gideon Thorne!" Weatherby's voice carried across the clearing, amplified by the strange acoustics of dawn. "Send out the woman, and we'll let you live. She's the one breaking the law. She's the one who needs to face justice." I looked at Nora, crouched beside me, behind the overturned table we were using for cover. She shook her head firmly. "Don't you dare," she said. "Don't even think it." I turned to the window and shouted back, "The only criminal here is you, Weatherby, and the only justice coming is the kind delivered by a jury. Then you both die, along with anyone fool enough to defend you." The assault intensified. Weatherby's men rushed the cabin in waves, trying to overwhelm our defenses through sheer numbers. Marcus and his volunteers met them with disciplined fire, dropping attackers before they reached the porch. But we were outnumbered. For every man who fell back, 2 more seemed to take his place. Weatherby had clearly spent his bail money recruiting every desperate miner and drifter in the territory. A bullet shattered the window above my head, showering us with glass. Another punched through a shutter, missing Nora by inches. We returned fire methodically, conserving ammunition, making every shot count. Then I heard Marcus scream. I risked a glance through the firing port and saw him clutching his stomach, blood spreading between his fingers. 2 of the other defenders were dragging him toward the cabin. "Cover them!" I shouted to Nora, then ran to the door. I opened it just enough for the men to pull Marcus inside, providing suppressing fire while they moved. Bullets chewed into the doorframe, splinters flying. Then we were all inside and I slammed the door shut, throwing the bolt. Nora was already moving, her medical training overriding fear. She cut away Marcus's shirt, revealing a bullet wound in his lower abdomen. Bad. Potentially fatal if the intestines were perforated. "I need to operate," she said, "right now, but I can't do it while under fire. I need light. I need stability. I need time." "Then I'll buy you time." I reloaded my rifle, checked my pistols. "How long? If everything goes perfectly? An hour, maybe more." An hour. I had to hold this cabin for an hour while Nora performed emergency surgery on the kitchen table with bullets flying outside. "Do what you need to do," I told her. "I'll handle the rest." She grabbed my face, kissed me hard. "Don't you dare die on me, Gideon Thorne." "Same to you, Dr. Calloway." The next hour was the longest of my life. I moved from window to window, firing, reloading, firing again. The 4 remaining volunteers did the same, creating the illusion of more defenders than we actually had. We made them pay for every foot of ground, every attempted rush, but our ammunition was running low. And Weatherby knew it. He was patient, letting his men probe our defenses, learning our patterns, waiting for the moment when we ran dry. Behind me, I heard Nora working with fierce concentration, the clink of instruments, her voice steady and commanding, telling Marcus to stay with her, stay conscious, fight. The smell of carbolic acid mixed with blood and gunpowder smoke. Then, just as I fired my last rifle round, I heard something that made my heart soar. Hoofbeats, many of them, coming fast up the trail. Marshal Kane burst into the clearing with 20 armed deputies, a posse drawn from every honest man in Copper Ridge. They hit Weatherby's forces from behind, catching them in a crossfire. The battle turned in minutes. Weatherby's hired guns, already demoralized by our resistance, broke and ran when faced with legal authority. Some surrendered immediately. Others fled into the forest, though Kane's men pursued. And there, in the center of the chaos, stood Cyrus Weatherby himself. His fine suit was torn and dirty, his carefully groomed hair was wild. His eyes held the manic gleam of a man who had gambled everything and lost. He saw me standing in the cabin doorway and raised his pistol. Time seemed to slow. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw the barrel swing toward me, knew I had no ammunition left to return fire. Then Nora appeared beside me, her rifle raised, her hands steady despite the blood covering them from Marcus's surgery. "Drop it," she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "I have already saved one life today. Don't make me take yours." Weatherby's hand trembled. For a moment I thought he would shoot anyway, go down in a blaze of defiance. But then Kane was there, pistol pressed against Weatherby's temple, and the moment passed. "You're under arrest," Kane said. "Again. And this time there won't be any bail." As deputies dragged Weatherby away, he screamed at us. "This isn't over. I have lawyers. I have friends. You think you've won? You've won nothing." But his voice faded as they took him down the mountain, and we were left standing in the wreckage of the battle, alive against all odds. Nora sagged against me. "Marcus?" "Still alive. I got the bullet out. Intestines were intact. He'll survive if infection doesn't set in." She looked up at me with exhausted eyes. "Did we really just win? We survived. That's its own kind of victory." The sun was fully up now, bathing the clearing in golden light. The cabin was riddled with bullet holes. The porch was scorched from the attempted fire, and 2 of Marcus's volunteers had minor wounds. But we were alive, all of us. Kane approached, his weathered face showing rare emotion. "That was the bravest damn thing I've ever seen. You 2 held off an army." "We had help," I said, gesturing to Marcus's men. "Still, you stood your ground when most people would have run. And Gideon, what you said about Weatherby facing jury justice. That's going to happen now. After this attack, after assaulting federal officers, there's no way he escapes conviction. You did it. You both did it." The trial took place 6 weeks later in Helena, the territorial capital. Weatherby sat in chains, his empire dismantled, his allies abandoning him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The prosecutor presented overwhelming evidence. The opium bottles with Weatherby's labels, financial records showing his profits from addiction, testimony from Marcus, Abigail, Thomas Riley, and a dozen others whose lives had been destroyed by his greed. And finally, testimony about the armed assault on our cabin witnessed by Marshal Kane and 20 deputies. Weatherby's expensive lawyers tried every trick. They claimed entrapment. They argued that Weatherby was a legitimate businessman being persecuted by vigilantes. They attempted to portray Nora as an unlicensed charlatan who had turned patients against a respected member of the community. But when Nora took the stand, she destroyed every argument with calm, methodical precision. She explained her medical training, producing letters from professors at Philadelphia Medical College who confirmed her skills despite the circumstances of her departure. She detailed each patient she had treated, the diagnoses, the procedures, the outcomes. She presented herself not as a crusader or a victim, but as a physician doing her job with competence and compassion. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Weatherby was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. His assets were seized to compensate his victims. His name would be remembered in Montana Territory as a cautionary tale about unchecked greed. As we left the courthouse, Marcus Webb was waiting with his wife Catherine and their 2 children. His wound had healed cleanly, leaving only a scar that he wore with pride. "Doc Calloway, Mr. Thorne," he said, "everyone back in Copper Ridge is waiting for you. They want to throw a celebration. For the 2 of you, for Marshal Kane, for justice actually being served for once." We rode back to Copper Ridge in a wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers, an absurd procession that made Nora laugh until tears ran down her face. The town square, that place where she had been humiliated and rejected, was transformed. Tables laden with food, musicians playing, people smiling and cheering. Marshal Kane gave a speech about courage and community. The mayor, a decent man who had been quietly gathering evidence against Weatherby for years, presented us with an official proclamation thanking us for our service to the territory. But the moment that mattered most came when Sarah, the mother whose son Timothy Nora had saved from croup, stepped forward with a wooden sign. "Doc Calloway," she said, "we took up a collection, and we want to give you this." The sign read, "Calloway Thorne Clinic, all welcome." No one turned away. "We found a building," Sarah continued, "the old church on the edge of town. We've been fixing it up, cleaning it, making it suitable for a proper medical practice. It's yours if you want it. A place where you can help people without having to live in isolation." Nora stared at the sign, then at the faces surrounding us. People she had healed. People who had stood by us during the darkest times. People who saw her not as a fat woman or an unlicensed fraud, but as a doctor who saved lives. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," I told her. "Say we'll build something permanent here, something that lasts." She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the same transformation I felt in my own heart. We had come to Montana running from pain, but somewhere along the way we had stopped running. We had found purpose. We had found each other. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Yes, we'll do it. We'll build a clinic that serves everyone. And we'll make sure no one suffers the way Weatherby's victims suffered." The crowd erupted in cheers. That night we rode back up to Thunder Peak one last time. The cabin would always be ours, a refuge when the world became too heavy. But our lives would be lived in Copper Ridge now, among people, serving the community that had accepted us. As we stood on the porch watching stars emerge, Nora leaned into me. "Gideon, do you remember what you said the day you chose me? That you needed a wife who wouldn't ask about your past?" "I remember." "Did you ever imagine it would turn into this life, this love?" I thought about Mary and Sarah buried on the hillside. I thought about the 4 years I spent as a ghost, existing but not living. I thought about the moment in that town square when I saw a woman refuse to be broken by cruelty. No, I said honestly, I imagined survival. I imagined endurance. I never imagined joy. Neither did I. But here we are. Here we are. She turned in my arms, her face illuminated by starlight. Marry me, Gideon, properly this time. Not as a transaction or an arrangement, but as partners who chose each other every single day. I thought you'd never ask. I kissed her, tasting salt from happy tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. We were married a month later in the new clinic, surrounded by patients we had saved and friends we had made. Marshall Kane stood as my best man. Abigail Foster, now working as Nora's assistant, served as maid of honor. The ceremony was simple, honest, filled with laughter and tears and promises we both intended to keep. When the preacher asked if I took Nora as my wife, I said the words I had been holding since that day in the town square. I chose her once when no one else would. I choose her now with my whole heart, and I'll choose her every day until my last breath. Nora's vows were equally direct. Gideon gave me a home when I had none, purpose when I had lost mine, love when I thought I was unlovable. I choose him, today, tomorrow, forever. The kiss we shared sealed not just a marriage, but a partnership forged in fire and tempered by survival. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, I stood outside the clinic watching Nora treat patients. The line stretched down the street, minors with injuries, families with sick children, women seeking care during pregnancy, elderly folks needing someone to listen to their ailments with respect and expertise. She moved among them with grace and authority, the woman she had always been meant to be, no longer hiding, no longer afraid, just healing, one person at a time. Marshall Kane walked up beside me, his own retirement from law enforcement imminent. He had decided to spend his final years writing a history of Montana Territory, ensuring stories like ours were not forgotten. You two did something remarkable, he said. You changed this town, made it better. Nora did that. I just supported her. Don't sell yourself short, Gideon. You saw value where others saw trash. You protected what needed protecting. You stood when standing was dangerous. That takes its own kind of courage. I thought about the man I had been 4 years ago. Hollow, haunted, convinced I deserved nothing but isolation and grief. That man would not recognize the person I had become. Kane, do you believe people can be redeemed? That past failures don't have to define your future? He considered the question seriously. I think redemption is possible for anyone willing to do the work. And you've done the work, my friend. You and Nora both. That evening, as sunset painted Thunder Peak in shades of fire, Nora closed the clinic and came to find me. I was building an addition to the structure, expanding to accommodate the growing need for medical services. Busy day? I asked. 3 broken bones, 1 difficult birth, and a case of pneumonia that required hospitalization. She smiled tiredly. I love every exhausting minute of it. That's good, because I have news that might make the days even busier. What news? I handed her a letter that had arrived that afternoon. It was from the territorial governor, responding to a petition signed by half of Copper Ridge. Nora read it aloud, her voice shaking with emotion. To Dr. Nora Calloway Thorne, in recognition of your exemplary service to the people of Montana Territory, and acknowledging the injustice of laws that prevent qualified women from practicing medicine, I hereby grant you an official medical license, with all rights and privileges thereto. Signed, Governor Benjamin Wade. She looked up at me, tears streaming. I'm legal, actually, officially legal. You always were. This just makes it official. I pulled her close. Nora, you're the first licensed female physician in Montana Territory. You're making history. We're making history. Together, and we were. The clinic grew. We trained other women in medicine, creating opportunities that had not existed before. We treated thousands of patients over the years, saving countless lives. But the moment I treasure most came 2 years after our wedding, when Nora told me she was pregnant. Are you sure? I asked, joy and terror mixing in equal measure. I'm a doctor, Gideon. Yes, I'm sure. She placed my hand on her belly. We're having a baby. Our family is growing. I thought of Mary and Sarah, and instead of pain, I felt peace. They would have loved Nora. They would have blessed this new life. What should we name her? I asked. Or him? If it's a girl, I'd like to name her Sarah, after your daughter, to honor her memory. And if it's a boy, Marcus, after the man who stood with us when it mattered most. Our daughter Sarah Marcus Thorne was born on a spring morning, healthy and loud and perfect. She came into the world surrounded by love, in a clinic her mother built, in a town that celebrated her arrival. And as I held her for the first time, her tiny hand gripping my finger with surprising strength, I understood something profound. Life was not about avoiding pain or hiding from loss. It was about standing in the face of both, and choosing to build something beautiful anyway. Nora had taught me that. This remarkable woman who refused to be diminished by a world determined to make her small, who turned rejection into purpose, who saved lives not because she wanted recognition, but because healing was written into her bones. Years later, when people asked me about the day I chose Nora in that town square, I always told them the same thing. I didn't rescue her, she rescued me. From grief, from isolation, from a half-life lived in shadows. She taught me that love is not about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be better. Someone who stands beside you in the fire and helps you forge something stronger than what you were alone. The mountains of Montana witnessed our transformation. From broken people running from pain to partners building a legacy of healing and hope. Our story was not about dramatic gestures or grand romance. It was about choosing each other every single day, about finding value in what the world discarded, about proving that the most powerful force in existence is not wealth or status or conventional beauty. It's the stubborn refusal to let cruelty have the final word. As I write this now, decades later, with Nora asleep beside me and our grandchildren playing in the yard, I can look back on that day in Copper Ridge with perfect clarity. When I stepped forward and said $500, I thought I was making a practical choice, a transaction to ease my loneliness and give her safety. I did not know I was choosing my salvation. I did not know I was choosing forever. But I am grateful every day that I spoke those words, that I saw past the surface to the extraordinary woman underneath, that I gave love a chance to grow in soil that seemed too damaged to support new life. Nora Calloway Thorne changed Montana territory. She changed medicine. She changed countless lives. But most importantly, she changed mine. And that, more than anything else, is the true reckoning of Thunder Peak. Not the battles won or villains defeated, but the simple, miraculous truth that two broken people can heal each other, one day at a time, until brokenness becomes strength and isolation becomes home. We chose each other, and that choice made all the difference. The end.